Hey, what's up everybody? Assassin's Creed Valhalla celebrated its 5th anniversary in 2025, and as we roll into 2026, I've seen some very interesting takes on the game, and as it features so heavily on our channel since it's launched this year, I thought I would do a bit of an kind of podcast and start off a gaming podcast series. So let's get into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, why everyone seems to hate it, and I'll give you two interesting takes that I think are worth sharing. Now, the first thing to say is that, yeah, everybody seems to hate on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. They usually complain that it's too bloated, too disconnected from the previous stories, it's not really an Assassin's game, etc, etc, etc. And there's all kinds of issues that get thrown up in that in terms of what gender the character is supposed to be, why it is that they don't become an actual assassin throughout the story, so why is it called Assassin's Creed? The list goes on as to the number of complaints that this game actually has had. And just to clarify on a couple of things, Eivor is supposed to be female. That's how it is in canon, and Eivor is a female name. Eivor Varinsdottir is literally Eivor, daughter of Varin, and Eivor is a feminine name. So it's sort of quite bizarre to me that people can't wrap their head around that or accept it for what it is. I mean, why do people hate on that so badly? So what if the main character is female? I don't quite get the gripe around that. If you're actually following the lore really carefully, the reason why you have a flip between male and female protagonists is actually because Eivor is female and Havi, however you want to pronounce it, he's actually the male equivalent. He is Odin. It's just very, very strange to me. And also, if you know a bit about Norse mythology, you will also understand that Odin himself can actually shapeshift. So, you know, he can change whatever gender and appear however he wants to appear. So the fact that you have Eivor, who is a reincarnation of Odin, appearing as a female as the main protagonist in this game, I don't understand why people have got an issue with that. And actually, personally, I find that the portrayal as a female character makes a lot more sense, particularly with Dag, because her relationship with him, well, he just doesn't ever seem to accept the fact that Eivor is essentially his leader. And I feel like as a misogynistic character, that makes a lot more sense for Dag. Like, why would he hate on male Eivor? It doesn't make any sense, but he would potentially have a bit of a gripe about following a female. That makes much more sense in terms of character story, and generally throughout there's a lot of that, particularly when characters will say to her that they expected someone of her reputation to be taller, bigger, more masculine, whatever. So it's not just in canon that Eivor is female, but it actually makes more sense in terms of the story. So the fact that there's still an argument about this 5 years later, it blows my mind, because just accept the fact that Eivor is female. It's just not a thing. So there's that. The second thing is that the game is overly bloated. In other words, that it's too big, too drawn out, too many side quests, etc, etc, etc. Now, I will say that I think a number of us on this channel will agree that some of the side quests, well, they're not great. They're very cringy. They seem to have a lot of characters in there that honestly just come across as being really weird or really stupid, and it is a little bit bizarre. I kind of feel that they weren't necessary, they didn't need it to be there. The main story is so good, I don't really see the point of the side quests myself. Maybe you just needed less of them, but if you're going to have them, I would say make them better, or at least give the character portrayals, the characters that appear in this, the NPCs, make them less irritating, less annoying, less weird. In terms of being bloated though and being too big, I get where people come from, that some of the arcs are a little bit competitive. In fact, when we started launching this channel and we said that Assassin's Creed Valhalla was going to be like the flagship game that we launched with, a lot of people had said to us that it was quite a problematic game to start with, and that we were going to struggle simply because we were going to find it really repetitive. I get what you mean. I mean, the arcs that you play in going to these different places within England as you play it, you do generally get the same kind of repetition. The stories differ ever so slightly, but you're essentially allying with somebody, fighting with them against a common enemy, and then you become an even closer ally to that person for the benefit of your clan, and then your clan and your village in Ravensthorpe gets to grow as a result of that. So it does become a little bit repetitive, But actually, when you tie it into the story, it actually makes a lot of sense because, okay, maybe the story arcs are a little bit similar between each one, but you need those allies to grow your army so that you can then go and fight and, like, say, for example, rescue Sigurd. So, you know, it makes sense that you would go and do that, increase your allies so that you can then have a big battle at the end. So, you know, there's a lot of sense that you can get out of why they've done it that way. Admittedly, I think some of the stories could have been a bit different, but a lot of them are also following history. So, you know, we're not talking completely outside the realms of possibility, particularly when we have the Sons of Ragnar who appear throughout the game and the things that they're doing. It's quite historically accurate to a degree in terms of what's happening. So, albeit it's repetitive, but some of that is actually what really happened. And in terms of the size of the game, the scope of it, how big England is and exploring and all that kind of thing, well, it's no real different to Red Dead Redemption, particularly number 2. So I've seen other people make that comparison as well, and I completely agree. There is no real size difference between those two, either in the number of hours that you play or in the geography of the game. So personally, I just think it's a thing, because if you love Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you're never going to say it's too bloated because you want more of that content, right? So, okay, fine. If you don't like the side quests and doing all the extra bits, then don't do them. Just stick to the main story and you can get the game done in a week. So, is it really that big? No, it's not. If you want to get like 100% completion and win every trophy, then yeah, it's going to feel like it's a big game. It's going to take a long time to do it. So, you're just going to have to accept that. But realistically, I don't see it as being any other different to any of the RPGs, especially that Assassin's Creed have come out with the exception of Mirage, which was a particularly short game. Now onto the subject of the RPGs, and one of the takes which I wanted to share with you was something that I heard this morning where somebody said, I believe it was on TikTok that I saw it, they basically claimed that all of the RPGs are as a result of Unity, and that Unity is the actual problem game. That was the one that created this catalyst of, let's say, failures in terms of what then happens with Assassin's Creed after that as a franchise in a whole. But the key problem was never Valhalla, it was always Unity, and here's why. When Unity came out, it was at the time when originally you had the PS3 and then the PS4 came out. And what Ubisoft, for some stupid reason, decided to do was give Rogue to PS3 players and give Unity to PS4 players. So they kind of split themselves in half in making two games and trying to go dual console effectively for that. And why they did that, I do not know. It's a ridiculous decision to me, particularly at the time I couldn't justify getting a PS4, meant that I only had Rogue on the PS3. Rogue is a great game, I had no problem with that, but I felt like that was the moment when originally I got cut off as an Assassin's Creed fan, because I had to go now and buy a brand new console to play Unity, even though they would have been perfectly capable of sticking it on the PS3. So that as a fan broke the fandom for me and the franchise for me at that time. But the problem with Unity specifically is that it was unbelievably buggy as a game. Like the parkour on it, some people say it's great, some people don't. But it's buggy generally. It was rushed so much to try and hit that release of the PS4 that they essentially overstretched themselves, particularly making two games at the same time for two different consoles. And because of that rushed degree of it, in terms of its production, it is very buggy. There's a lot of issues with it. And because of that, naturally the fan base then started to kind of kick up a fuss and say that there were a lot of problems with it. But Ubisoft essentially, rather than addressing the fact that the problem was the bugs, they felt like everything was the problem. So everything from storylines to parkour systems to assassinations, like literally they considered everything to be the problem. And the fans never said that. What we said was it was a buggy game. But they took that to mean that everything needed to be changed. Roll on a couple of games and you've got the RPG sagas. As a result of that, it literally comes from them trying to make all of the changes to every element of the game, from Isu lore all the way through to the Templars suddenly disappear and don't really become a thing. The Assassins kind of disappear, they actually start being referred to as the hidden ones in their prequel, and they go RPG rather than linear storytelling. So that's the moment, that was the key. That's when the franchise shifted from what it always used to be to kind of what we have now. So Unity was the problem. The RPGs generally I don't have so much of an issue with, as we obviously love Valhalla on this channel. That's just how it is. I personally quite like Origins as well, because I feel like it's really relevant in terms of the creation of the Hidden Ones and then the Assassins and how that came to be. I'll get onto why Valhalla is important in a moment, because that's take number 2. But I feel like certainly Odyssey and definitely Shadows, they lack connectivity and they lack lore, and they really kind of follow historical events rather than being an Assassin's Creed story, in my opinion. And there's no real element in there that ties it in with other stuff. Obviously you've got Cassandra, who kind of goes on and then starts playing and intermingling with other games later on. And you've got that slight issue connection in terms of the deities that appear in that game. But that's where it starts branching out and kind of doing its own thing. But it follows you more as being somebody living in the time and going through historical events than being an assassin kind of intertwining with those things. You're not an assassin ultimately at the end of the day, and that's something that then follows through in other things. So take number 2, and the reason why Valhalla though as an RPG is actually really important is because of, I think it was 3 main things. Number 1, if it wasn't for Eivor, you wouldn't have the Templars. And that's one hell of a take, because actually it's entirely true. She starts going after people who are like that weird cult that exists at the time, that King Alfred is trying to undermine and get rid of. And in the process of doing so, Eivor ends up kind of eliminating all of them, out of which comes the Templar Order. So she kind of, by being manipulated in that way by Alfred, actually ends up creating the very thing that become the enemy of the Assassins later on. So you wouldn't have Assassin's Creed 1, for example, and the Templars and everything later in time if it wasn't for what happened and what Eivor did because of Alfred in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So it's majorly important in terms of the timeline and what she does in this game. So that was an epic take. The second one of that part is that if it wasn't for Eivor, Assassin's Creed 3 will never happen, and Desmond never gets to save the world. That's a huge thing, but completely true, because actually if you go and you do all of the missions that are in Valhalla, you will get the moment where you go over to the New World, to essentially America, and over there, while she's there, she actually discovers an Apple of Eden, and she, by uncovering it and giving it to the tribes that live there, that then becomes the tribe for Connor later on in Assassin's Creed 3. So had she not have been there, had she not have found it, had she not have given it to that tribe, you would never have got Connor essentially finding it later on, which is why Desmond is tracking his roots and trying to find that Apple of Eden to save the world. So if it wasn't for Eivor, the world would have ended by Assassin's Creed 3. We'd all be doomed. So she actually saves the world inadvertently, indirectly, but it's all down to the actions that she takes. So number 1, there'd be no Templars without her. Number 2, Desmond wouldn't have saved the world without her. There'd be no Assassin's Creed 3. So 2 massive, massive, massive bits of lore. The third one off of the back of that is that you also wouldn't get the actual story in Valhalla where Layla saves the world. So actually Eivor saves the world twice, because it's her memories that Layla uses to save the world for a second time. So you've actually got 2 massively important, literally world-saving, humanity-saving things that are directly as a result of Eivor, and that's why she's such a hugely important character to the lore, regardless of whether she wanted to become an assassin or not. The fact that she didn't is true to her character. You can't argue that. So I felt like she's massively important. It's hugely relevant, ties in with her character perfectly. Everything that she does and the decisions that she makes tie in beautifully with everything else in terms of Assassin's Creed. As a prequel, it's perfect. So I don't really get the hate, because I feel like that game is hugely important to the whole story overall. And also you can tie in the Isu relevance as well. She is obviously a reincarnation of Odin, who was an Isu. So, you know, you've got all of that relevance that happens in there as well. It does go a bit out there when it starts going through all of the Norse stories and stuff that happens in Asgard and whatnot. But, you know, you've got to tie that in, because naturally that's what happened in Odyssey. So you kind of have to go through that a little bit for it to feel like that same kind of RPG saga. So there we go, 5 years on since Assassin's Creed Valhalla came out, and these things I think are just very underappreciated when it comes to the lore. The fact that Valhalla is not really, well, in my opinion, not even close to being the worst game in the franchise. It's also not the game that killed the franchise. That was Unity, but also a massively important game in terms of its lore and its story. So actually, is Valhalla the most hated game in Assassin's Creed? It shouldn't be, because it's hugely important, and certainly we think here, a damn good game. So that's just our take. And on that bit of, I suppose, positivity, it is time to end. So thank you very much for watching. We'll see you guys in the next video. The vlog is over.